Welcome back to Best Asian Horror Movies. I'm your host Blinky, and today we're going to be exploring Takashi Miike's Audition. The movie is a cult classic and is widely regarded as one of the best Japanese horror movies of all time, but the source of its true terror is not what you would expect. We're also going to be discussing how the film influenced horror movies around the world, as well as what has been perceived as the decline of J-horror in recent years. At the end of the video, we're going to give the film our own rating based on story, atmosphere, and bone-breaking terror. Before we begin, please like and subscribe. Thanks! Audition, directed by Takashi Miike, is a psychological horror film based on the novel of the same name by Ryu Murakami. The film follows Aoyama, a middle-aged widower who has been struggling to move on from the death of his wife. Encouraged by his son Tetsu and a close friend Yasuhisa, Aoyama decides to start dating again. However, rather than simply approaching this through traditional means, Yasuhisa suggests holding an audition for a fake film project, with the hope of finding a potential wife from the pool of female candidates. Now, in case you didn't catch it, Yasuhisa is played by the legendary Jun Kinemura, who played none other than the Japanese man in The Wailing, a true horror icon. As Aoyama begins the sham audition, he becomes captivated by a soft-spoken woman named Asami, who seems to embody the kind of ideal he's been searching for. Despite her mysterious aura and subtle eccentricities, Aoyama decides to pursue a relationship with her. But as the relationship progresses, strange occurrences and unsettling behavior from Asami begin to surface, revealing a dark and violent past. What initially appears to be a tender romance spirals into a horrific nightmare as Asami's true nature is slowly uncovered, culminating in a shocking and grotesque finale that blends psychological terror with brutal, squirm-inducing gore. Audition has had a significant impact on the horror genre, particularly within the realm of psychological horror. Its influence can be seen in the works of filmmakers who explore the boundaries between human desire and terror, blending reality and nightmarish scenarios. For instance, movies like The Orphan and The Loved Ones share Audition's approach to slow burn tension and the eventual revelation of extreme violence. These films, like Audition, explore the terrifying consequences of seemingly benign interactions, showing how innocence and normalcy can be subverted into horror. The film's slow buildup, combined with its shocking and visceral payoff, also inspired a wave of horror films in the early 2000s that mixed psychological suspense with graphic content. Hostel, directed by Eli Roth, exhibits a similar juxtaposition of calm narrative buildup followed by an unexpected bloody brutality. Audition's influence is particularly felt in the torture porn subgenre. Can I say that on YouTube? Torture porn? Anyways, where horror elements are slowly teased out before delivering a climactic, often grotesque release of violence. Its success in creating an unnerving atmosphere, while ultimately disturbing the audience, paved the way for a different kind of horror, one that would linger long after the credits roll. Audition stands out from other horror films due to its mastery in blending genres, its pacing, and its psychological depth. The film begins with what appears to be a conventional romantic story. Miike expertly uses this calm and seemingly ordinary setup to lull viewers into a false sense of security, allowing the horrifying events to strike even harder when they finally unfold. The pacing is deliberate, with tension building slowly as the relationship between Aoyama and Asami deepens. This slow burn approach is one of the key elements that makes the movie so memorable, as it allows for a gradual transformation of the narrative from romance to terror. The character of Asami is also central to the film's uniqueness. Her initially enigmatic and gentle persona eventually gives way to a darker, more sadistic side. This contrast between her outward appearance and her true nature makes her one of the most unsettling characters in horror cinema. Her motivations, which are revealed in disturbing flashbacks, suggest a deep psychological trauma that adds layers of complexity to her character. The depth of this character is a departure from the often one-dimensional villains in horror films, making Asami not just a monster, but also a tragic figure. Additionally, the film's shocking finale, which involves gruesome acts of violence, is another defining feature that sets it apart from conventional horror. The brutal imagery in the final act of the film, particularly the scenes involving physical mutilation, is shocking and disturbing in a way that few other films have achieved. Yet, Miike carefully balances these extreme moments with psychological complexity, ensuring that the horror is not only visual, but also emotional. On a recent podcast with Bobby Lee, comedy legend Bill Burr revealed that he had recently started watching Asian horror movies and had the following to say.
Oh my God, dude, I got a horror movie for people at home. And then I saw the Audition, and I got into Asian horror movies but they were so beyond what we were doing over here. I was like, this is like bananas.
Now, I have a long list of movies I need to watch and review, but when old Billy Rednuts gave Audition a shout out, I had to bump it up the list. In the early 2000s, Japanese horror was experiencing a golden age, with films like Ringu, Ju-On, and Audition at the forefront of the genre. These films were known for their eerie atmospheres, unsettling stories, and reliance on psychological terror rather than explicit gore. However, in the years following their international success, the genre began to lose some of its luster, with several factors contributing to its decline. One reason for the decline was the increasing commercialization of the genre. As Japanese horror films became more popular worldwide, there was a push to cater to a broader audience, which led to a dilution of the unique qualities that made these films stand out. Many horror movies began to rely on cheap scares and formulaic plots, stripping away the psychological depth that made films like Audition so compelling. Additionally, as the genre became more saturated, it became harder to surprise audiences, and many films failed to live up to the high standards set by earlier works. Another factor was the growing influence of Western horror films. As Hollywood remakes of The Ring and The Grudge began to dominate global box offices, Japanese filmmakers were pressured to adapt to a more mainstream style, often losing the atmospheric subtleties that made the original films so effective. Here at Best Asian Horror Movies, we're going to be rating our films based on 3 criteria: story, atmosphere, and terror, with each category eligible for a maximum of 6 bloody skulls. Now, you could honestly swap the first hour of the film with any romance movie. The pacing is so slow and deliberate in the first few acts that it almost makes you forget that you're watching one of the greatest J-horrors of all time. Now, there are subtle hints and brief disturbing moments throughout, but it really feels like a typical love story, albeit with a quirky setup. But once the truth about Asami begins to be revealed and the film kicks into full gear, ultimately culminating in one of the most grotesque scenes in horror history, you realize just how deep and complex the story and characters are. It's a long setup for an excellent payoff, tragedy and brutality notwithstanding. 6 bloody skulls. One thing I noticed around halfway through the film was that there are almost no exterior shots. Everything takes place within homes or office buildings, creating an especially claustrophobic atmosphere, particularly in the scene where Aoyama goes to investigate the Stonefish bar. That narrow staircase leading down into the bar was so tight and dark, and the lighting made it feel so hellish. It's really where the second half of the film kicks into gear. Now, nothing particularly scary about 1999 Tokyo when compared to films like Impetigore that are set in the jungles of Indonesia, so maybe my standards are a bit too high after watching that film, but I'm gonna go ahead and give this 4 bloody skulls. Oh man, where to begin here? The second half of the movie, in the build-up to that final scene, reveals Asami's past and her motivations, with the viewer experiencing it through what are either Aoyama's nightmares or hallucinations. The climax, where Asami is torturing a powerless Aoyama, is made even more brutal by the lack of background music, which makes every stab, every slice feel even more visceral. The expressions and taunting from Asami while she's doing it are nothing short of sadomasochistic. It's clear she's having the time of her life carving up Aoyama. But the true horror of the film doesn't come from this scene or the nightmarish flashbacks that preceded it. It comes from how real it feels that Asami had her life destroyed as a child when she was abandoned and abused, spending hours and hours every day lying on the floor of her apartment with no friends and no family. It comes from Aoyama losing his wife. It comes from Tetsu losing his mom before he could say goodbye. It even comes from Yasuhisa's nihilistic views that even in 1990s Tokyo, a city of over 15 million people, everyone feels alone. I almost cried watching this. It's so sad. So sad. Fuck me. 6 bloody skulls. Alright, that's it for today. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what movie you'd like me to review next. Any feedback for how to improve these videos and make the channel better would be greatly appreciated. And thanks. Have a good one. Bye.